we're gearing up to sue, to enforce the FOIA request. And about that time along came the affidavit secretary, Mr. Austin, and a whole lot of other people, the entire cabinet, effectively. And to our very much surprise, we came to find that all of the affidavits for the oath of office, as required by law, 5 U.S.C. 3331 and 3332, they were all either defective or missing entirely.
The judges are in on this, right? And the attorney generals, they know that there's no oath to be had because it's all written in fiction, so it says nothing. So the words that they're using are dead. They know this, right? They've seen the videos in the courtrooms. The Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice have all been in the courtrooms with me, so they know exactly what's going on, right? They know that there are no words here. They know that there's no government. And these people that are talking are just leading the blind of the general public who don't have knowledge that the United States government ceased to exist in 1999. At least one of them said, hey, maybe even Trump's illegitimate. Well, yes, they all are, because you have to follow the continuance of the evidence, which would lead to through the law of the flag. And this is what David and I did, which was so valuable. So valuable is we were able to time it and claim the flag so nobody else could set terms of rules.
So what does this mean in a practical sense? I mean, it sounds like they're imposters.
Well, this is the funny part. You could expect that maybe somebody forgot to have their oath of office notarized, right? Because that's really where we see the common defect. But not have the entire cabinet's oath of office completely missing. You know, these are required by law. How else would we prove there is a duty of this person serving this role to the people that they are representing, or the people that the government represents? And so there's a requirement of a written oath that comes all the way back from the Civil War. And if they're missing that, the statute reads that all of their acts are void ab initio, as though they didn't happen. Effectively, what you said is right. They're actors. They're not official at all.
Well, what about Joe Biden?
Yeah, he has a separate oath. It's really interesting. His comes from the Constitution itself. From what we can see, there's nothing requiring him to have a written oath of office.
Okay, so you're talking then primarily about the cabinet members. Anyone else?
Yeah, including the quote-unquote vice president. That's why I kept saying I'm not sure I should call him Secretary Austin. He's Mr. Austin. He doesn't have that official title if he's not there serving lawfully. And that was the question. We filed a writ quo warranto, comes from Old England. Show your authority. By what authority do you act? And we filed it with the U.S. attorney, because one of the things you'll see as you look through the exhibits is the Attorney General's oath of office is defective. Not only is it not notarized, it doesn't have an appointment date. So by the time we filed this writ with the U.S. attorney, Lisa's other FOIA came back, and sure enough, he also has a defective oath of office. So who then is serving lawfully? And by the way, sorry, Mike, that's the guy prosecuting the January 6ers.
Oh, the right of grievance is always supposed to go for settlement through the courts. The attorneys themselves, the Attorney General's office, they don't need an oath as well, because this is a private club. And the private club is to harvest the people. And so there are a few of us that know, and there are more and more of us that are learning about the grammar. And they're learning that this is a shipping war, right, through the docking of our birth certificate. All this ties back into the shipping paradigm, which I've corrected on a grammar level and a hieroglyphic level on a global level, to drop the citizens of the world out of this shipping war that we've been put into unbeknownst to us when we were docked here, birthed here. So it's still a shipping concealment guise to create harvest, because even if there were oaths, they would have to have bills of ladings on it, and they don't have to have any of that because they know what's up. So of course they're not going to take any oaths. Why would they?
I was going to make that exact point. Stuart Rhodes just sentenced to 18 years in prison, apparently under the, quote, authority of an attorney general who you are saying does not have a functioning oath of office, which would lead many people the question whether that Attorney General is actually the Attorney General or just Mr. Garland.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Lisa, you want to chime in?
Immediate pushback, emails back. And, once you submit a FOIA, they are required to respond. So they do respond, but it is in, we're going to send you here, we're going to send you there. They send you every other department but the one that you're inquiring about and where they should have the information. I mean, it got to be comical, but it isn't because it's horrendous. And very early on, it's like this light bulb. It's like, why wouldn't these people have their oath of office? I mean, wouldn't you be proud to present your oath of office? It should be a very easy task to provide. And another thing that's very important to note, which I wasn't aware of the importance of, I was aware of it, but just the profound significance of the Federal Register. Every single appointee has to file their oath of office, notarized, or their affidavit. I always forget what it's called, Todd. If they choose not to get it notarized,
there's a substitute. It's sworn under penalty of perjury.
Thank you. But those have to be filed within 30 days with the Federal Register of their appointment. And recently, the FOIA agency has closed the ability to FOIA to the Federal Register under cited standards. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So closing the door to protect the secrecy. Yeah. But I have a lot of questions. I'm sure our audience will as well. But question number one is, if I go to the Federal Registry, or if I were able to, and look at, let's say, Trump's cabinet, all those officials have oaths of office on file?
Well, he's now archived because he's no longer, he's a previous president. So he and I we FOIA'd for those. Very lovely letter back from a representative saying that, very official, like they should be. All these other letters have not been, typos and, different things. They are not able to provide those yet because they're setting up his library, but they will as soon as they're able to, because I don't quite understand why they wouldn't still be in the register, but
these people that are talking on this audio are all putting some kind of stock in the Federal Register. And the Federal Register is a place where bills of lading are laden and unladen for cargo of words to be stored. However, the Federal Register lost its authorization to even exist as a holding storage facility because the position of Title 39, Section 101, subsection A and subsection B were breached by the Post Office in the 2000 presidential election. And so what's happening here is that these are people that think they're pretty educated, these attorneys or whoever's speaking here, Adams or whoever these people are, and they can't figure it out. They're close, but they can't figure it out that the very place that they're going to authenticate is the fraud. And so they're blinded by subject matter interpretation of subject matter of an oath and failing to look at the administrative mechanics of a Federal Register for a storage facility for a bill of lading. Because the Federal Register gets its authorization through the Department of Transportation, which gets its authorization from the Post Office, who breached Title 39, Section 101, subsection A and subsection B in the presidential election of 2000 when the United States government ceased to exist. So it's it's a sad thing to watch. These people are very ignorant. So we have ignorant people leading the general public into subject matter of an oath, and yet the administrative mechanics of storage of a Federal Register, the authorization, the credentialing for that just does not exist. It exists because the flag was copyrighted by David and I right before the Constitution ended in 1999 on August 12th. So they don't have the right to set up a Federal Register, nor do they have the right to move a bill of lading. The Federal Register always gets its authorization through the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation gets its authorization from the Post Office, and that doesn't exist anymore. So the Federal Register itself is a fraud. This is why they don't have to have oaths. They know exactly what they're doing by changing the language to change the concept of an oath, right? David trained up Kamala. That's a true statement, right? David spent a lot of time with Kamala. She is very gifted in the bankruptcy. She knows she's a good thief. That's why she's been put in position. So these people are using the language because they know it's a grammar issue and they know the authorization. They know they don't have a flag. And it's really quite fascinating to see these people, these influencers here on this audio, talking about something that they just don't understand. They don't have knowledge of, and yet they're leading the general public into a concept of an oath when they're the mechanic to accept an oath. Because they keep talking about a notary. Well, the reason why they need a notary on there is because it's a shipping issue to move a bill of lading. And the public officers and the judges all know that they don't need to give a notary because there's no bill of lading. It's just all show. It's just all theatrics. So they don't need to show anything because they're not really public officials. So the duty is to, what most people don't realize is that the money that they collect and harvest from the people does not actually go to the payment of the government. So what's happening here, and it's been happening since 1999, is independent banking families have been paying through private money to fund the projects of the government and different branches of the government. And that's really what's going on here.
I do have an answer to that as well. Like, what we've come to find is that this is rampant, that it probably goes back to 1964. In 1963, on January 10, the Communist Manifesto called The Naked Communist was read into the congressional record. 55 or so items were listed there. Number 13 of which was to eliminate the oath of office. It's like a tick-back exercise. How do you destroy the United States of America? How do you eliminate sovereignty? All the things in Agenda 21 were put there. Mind you, later that year, November 22 of 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated. And so as we are looking for these various oaths in the states, we're finding missing ones for sheriffs, for governors. We're finding the same thing now throughout the federal government, even in the military. It seems as though officers kind of 06 and higher are missing their oaths of office. It's the statute requires it, right? What we want to know is, why don't you have it? How? And we're trying to get to a court to say, hey, judge, you ask them, you subpoena them, you issue the writ. I'm just a private lawyer. But getting to the court is also not such an easy thing to do, given that we're starting to find the oaths of offices of judges are also defective.
And when you say defective, does that mean it's missing notarization or missing a signature,
yes,
or what?
Amongst other things.
Okay.
Yeah. Missing notarizations is the most common one. But sometimes we found, Lisa can share, that the language has changed. The language that they have to swear to is a function of statute. Judges have some additional language. Other people, Congress people, have 3 different types of language. But you find sometimes they just substitute it in their own stuff.
What?
Yeah.
This is by statute.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is ad-libbing their oaths of office?
So we had, and there were, so they take a ceremonial swearing in. That does not equate or represent or substitute the written oath of office. So it doesn't count. Secretary, I'm not even going to call her Secretary, Yellen, Granholm for Energy, and Buttigieg for Transportation sent links, and Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, sent links to either YouTube or C-SPAN and of their ceremonial swearing in. 2 of them have masks on, so you can't even hear them. But that doesn't, and they actually presented it as a question to me on official letterhead. Is this what you're looking for?
What?
Yes. And what?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part, Lisa. What was that?
So this is very interesting, and I think this really does bear weight. Kamala Harris swore them all in. She was the official person. So she recited the oath, and then they repeated her. Every single one, and I went through these like 25 times, listened to make sure that this is accurate. She switched the wording on the verbal reciting of it for them on each and every one of them. She switched up a different word, and it's very subtle, but each one of those have recited an incorrect, inaccurate oath.
So, first of all, this is fascinating, and I can imagine you're digging down this rabbit hole. You're probably uncovering all kinds of little pathways of question marks, but there is, a contingent of people in this country who believe that the 2020 election, of course, was stolen. I mean, I believe it was stolen, but there's another contingent of people who believe that the Biden administration is a theatrical, a projection of, they're bluffing. They're all imposters. They're not really in charge. And that there's what they call a continuity of government, like Trump is still the president and COG is still actually in charge, and they're waiting for some big unveiling event or something. I mean, what you're presenting here kind of actually might feed into that narrative, you could say.
Yeah, it could. I mean, that's sort of what we're, either that or how far has it gone back? Was Trump not really in office either if the oaths haven't been properly, if they're not properly executed and filed at with the Federal Register. What is interesting, we did, which may be to your point, when I filed the FOIA for the Chief Judge of the United States District Courts in Washington, D.C. That's a heavy hitter, James Boasberg. It came back shockingly, like within a couple of days. It's defective. I also, that the same day, requested for all of Trump appointees. Now, it wasn't necessary. I mean, it was to compare, but just to see previous judges. We have not gotten anything. It's been 2 months. So
is it possible that we've been living in a country that is no longer the constitutional republic that we thought for a very long time? Is that what you're saying?
Todd can answer that. I mean, it's terrifying to think about.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Can I just go back and explain something that's really important? I want people to understand the significance of this. Because, trust me, we've had this conversation. I've got co-counsel Ken Ferguson, and then Lisa and I, and other lawyers in my firm. We've batted this around a lot. To understand that one person, right, maybe didn't find a notary to swear their oath in front of. I understand that. But when you see a pattern where all of them didn't do that, then there's a methodology, right? There's a plan to this. And why would one do that? We started flipping through the charges that might be applicable, including impersonating a federal official. But when you get to the jury instructions as they relate to the charges of sedition and treason, what you find is that you have to prove that these persons that you're accusing of treason or sedition had a duty. How does one evidence that they have a duty to the job or to the people they represent? It's by a written oath of office. And so if all of these people are missing their oath of office, is it possible that they're trading out in their minds, well, we're not going to hang for treason, but they might get us for impersonating federal officials? That's where the analysis leads you to.
Very good point. Very good point. And especially in the context of what I believe has been a DOD-created biological weapon that was unleashed upon the American people by the military leaders, by people in the bureaucracy, high-level people, including in various agencies. As you know, both of you have documented this. So perhaps those people, as you just said, Todd, would be concerned that they might, let's say, theoretically, if prosecuted, hang for treason if they had oaths of office. So by design, then, they don't have oaths of office, which might lessen some future charge against them? Is that the thinking?
The military is funded by private funding, and that is why the military does not have to have an oath of office, because they're not working for the government. They're working for private funding. The private funding has vested interest to continue war theater against the people of the world. So it's a very sad and rude and mean game that they've been playing to close the governments, not tell the general public that the governments are closed, and then come around the back door through private venture capitalism to create feudal ventures against the people, but the money that they collect from the people, they pocket that as well. So they're pocketing on both sides of the ledger, but the money that people are being collected for taxes are not actually going in to pay the government or the government employees. They're going to private venture capitals as well. So the military is basically admitting here, or Space Force, I should say, admitting that the funding for them is not coming from the people, but it's coming from private venture capitalists. And so this is why people like Todd Callender and these other people are buffoons, because they can't put this together, realizing that, oh, wait a minute, there is no military. There actually is not a military. There's no United States military. It ended in 1999. Right? It's private venture capital since then to create havoc and steal the citizens' rights, because they have no rights because the Constitution ended. And so this is where a contract, and what I've done is set up a global meritocracy to sidestep and not be part of that paradigm. They know exactly what's going on here. So they're all in on it against you guys, and then against me too. Don't just kid yourself out. They hate me the most. But they just don't want to acknowledge it, because they have to stop and correct as well. So it's quite a tar pit that's been set up for everybody on condition of mind, condition of accountability. And, the attorneys, like Todd Callender, because they've seen some of the performances in the federal courthouses on video, get quite concerned about me, because I'm going to lock them up too for their false grammar, for their lies against the people.